There is a moment, quiet and precise, when a man realizes courage is not something to summon, but something to be found by steady habit. In that stillness, the sword feels heavy, and the breath shallow, and the mind offers every excuse it has learned to survive. Miyamoto Musashi wrote that the way is in training, not in inspiration. Confidence, like skill, is born in repetition, not in speeches. Listen to that thought closely, because the path ahead is not a pep talk, but a sequence of small, deliberate refusals. Chapter 1. The Awakening. Kenji first felt the absence of confidence as a shape in the room with him. A paused conversation at work, a missed opportunity to speak in a meeting, the way his hands trembled before a presentation. He had read Musashi and the texts of the samurai, but his knowledge was a library he did not yet live in. Ideas sat on shelves while fear dictated his days. The awakening came one morning when he realized that words alone would not change the muscle memory of shrinking. Something simpler and more brutal was required. Chapter 2. Rule 1. Simplicity by elimination. The samurai practiced reduction. They removed excess until only what mattered remained, a practice mirrored in Zen's insistence on empty space. Kenji began by removing half of what filled his calendar. Social obligations that blurred his edges, tasks he performed out of habit rather than purpose, comfort that kept him small. In the absence of noise, he found a surprising resource: time to practice one small, non-negotiable action each day that targeted his fear directly. Chapter 3. Rule 2. The non-negotiable action. Discipline in Bushido is never theatrical. It is the repetition of the same modest action until it becomes a habit and then an identity. Kenji chose one practice. Each morning, he walked into the public square near his office and spoke loudly for 30 seconds about a small truth, an opinion, a memory, an observation, regardless of whether anyone listened. At first, his voice cracked and his palms sweated. Yet the repetition rewired the body's response to exposure, turning a rare act of courage into a predictable ritual. Chapter 4. Rule 3. Presence and the economy of breath. Zen teaches that attention is currency. Breath is the ledger that records where attention flows. The samurai trained with breathing to remain calm under pressure, to make decisions from clarity rather than panic. Kenji learned to breathe as a deliberate bridge between impulse and action, pausing to count 4 breaths before speaking in any situation that mattered, and letting silence become the sheath that steadied the sword of his intent. Chapter 5. Rule 4. Identity through small wins. Musashi advised that one should become what one practices, that a person must inhabit their discipline until it rearranges their self. Kenji did not announce he was confident. He stopped waiting to feel it. Instead, he collected small, unremarkable victories. A conversation initiated, an idea voiced, a meeting attended fully present, and allowed his sense of self to be reconstructed by the ledger of what he had done rather than the stories he told himself. Chapter 6. Rule 5. Surrender to the moment. There's a paradox in the warrior's path. True strength is not force, but surrender to the present, a letting go of futures and pasts that distract. Bushido does not promise domination over circumstance, only mastery over choice, and that mastery is exercised as a calm acceptance when outcomes cannot be controlled. Kenji learned to release the narrative of failure before it formed, to meet each moment with the question, "What can I do from here?" rather than the fear of what might follow. Chapter 7. Systems, not willpower. Ancient practice is not drama, it is architecture. Musashi's life was built on systems, how he trained, ate, moved, and thought, so that when chaos arrived, the structure held. Kenji replaced episodic courage with a system, a morning speech, midday breath work, evening inventory of small wins, and weekly removal of one obligation that diluted his focus. Over time, the system required less friction to operate. Action became the default. Chapter 8. The Internal Struggle and Its Quiet Resolution. The hardest work was never public. It lived in the private negotiations Kenji made with himself each day, the balancing of comfort and growth, the forgiveness for days he failed to practice. He discovered that discipline carried compassion. When he missed a morning speech, he did not chastise himself into paralysis. He recommitted without drama, understanding the long arc of practice. This steadiness, more than any triumph, remade his inner climate into one where confidence could grow like a slow, resilient root. Chapter 9. Transformation into Stabilized Presence. Months later, the changes were not theatrical but persistent. Kenji did not become reckless or loud. He became present. Meetings where he had once retreated became fields he could move through with a calm attentiveness. Conversations where he had once avoided silence were now opportunities to listen and then speak. The samurai way is not applause. It is an internal sovereignty that greets challenge like an old friend, neither seeking praise nor fearing loss. Conclusion. Confidence, as the ancients teach, is not a flame you must constantly rekindle, but a hearth you build brick by brick through small, disciplined acts. Miyamoto Musashi called for training without indulgence. The samurai called for presence without drama. Zen called for surrender and clarity of breath. If you take one thing from Kenji's path, let it be this. Choose one non-negotiable action that targets your fear. Remove what distracts. Practice breath and presence, and let identity follow deed. In that quiet, steady way, confidence arrives, not shouted, but lived